For 3,000 years, the most successful financial minds did not avoid obligation, they mastered it, building interconnected economic systems that lasted generations. We are translating that historical architecture into a practical, one-page document, your Solomonic Debt Strategy Blueprint. Grab a pen and paper, divide your page into 3 columns. First, we will audit your existing obligations for productive output. Second, we map your transition to the lender seat. Finally, we establish precise exit criteria for your future agreements. Mapping these obligations within specific legal and financial boundaries turns standard debt into an instrument of leverage. Let's begin with the audit. Step 1. In your first column, list every monthly financial obligation you currently carry. We must look at the raw numbers before applying the mathematical audit. This illustrates the productive output rule. Debt functions as a tool when it is attached to an asset that generates more revenue than the cost of the debt itself. A car loan for a vehicle that only facilitates a commute is an example of a trap, marked here by the red X. The first valid application of debt is acquiring income-generating assets. A mortgage on a property that produces rental revenue outpaces its own monthly cost, allowing the debt to pay for itself while yielding a surplus. The second application involves funding infrastructure that others pay to use. John D. Rockefeller applied this architecture to the oil industry in the 19th century. Instead of taking on obligations to buy individual oil wells, he controlled the pipelines and refineries. Every producer who needed to bring their oil to market became economically dependent on Rockefeller's infrastructure. The third application is diversification. Solomon advised spreading obligations across multiple productive streams. This prevents a single point of failure from destabilizing your entire financial foundation. Any liability that fails to meet these criteria is a debt wound. It creates a cycle of paying interest on depreciating value, pulling resources from your net worth. Look at the list in column 1. If an obligation fails to meet at least one of these 3 productive criteria, it is a liability you should aim to eliminate. Column 2 maps your positional pivot. Moving into the seat of the lender does not require millions of dollars in cash capital. A positional lender provides value that is difficult to replicate. When you deliver specialized skills, knowledge, or access that others need to function, you shift the power dynamic of the relationship. When Solomon needed cedar for construction, he didn't simply purchase the materials. He engineered a strategic arrangement with Hiram of Tyre, providing grain in exchange for access to these valuable timber resources. The obligation was mutual, but because Hiram's population relied on that grain to survive, the primary leverage remained with Solomon. He provided the essential system. This is the leverage loop. By providing specific value, whether grain or specialized skills, you create a continuous flow of obligation back to your own operation. In column 2, identify one specialized skill or service you possess. Note the precise value you deliver that your market or employer relies on to function. When an operation relies on your specific output to run, the market begins to pay you tribute for continued access to your systems. Column 3 maps your exit strategy. The Shmita was an ancient Hebrew legal code that mandated the cancellation of debts every 7 years. Because lenders could not collect interest indefinitely, this forced time limit required parties to be purposeful. They had to ensure the debt was productive before the mandatory release date. A common mistake today is entering into open-ended financial agreements. Many borrowers carry debt for decades without a defined boundary for its conclusion. Before taking on any new obligation, you must answer these 3 questions. First, exactly how and when does this obligation legally end? Second, what specific, measurable, productive output will this debt generate before that end date arrives? And third, at what exact moment does this financial obligation officially transition from a debt into a pure generating asset? Failing to answer these 3 questions before signing a contract means you are handing the tool of debt to someone else to use against you. Look at the paper you just completed. These 3 columns represent a functional operating system for managing your personal capital. You now have a mathematical plan to transition from the seat of the borrower to the seat of the lender. Share your city, your country, and your identified positional skill in the comments. This establishes a baseline of accountability within this community. Subscribe to the channel to study these historical wealth principles in greater detail. Take this blueprint and begin building your own financial infrastructure.